A struggling father walks into a world of wealth with nothing but a lunchbox packed with love for his daughter. Parents stare. Security moves to throw him out. But then a man in a black apron steps forward. A caterer, or so it seems. In front of everyone, he takes that simple meal and plates it like fine dining. But here's the twist. This caterer isn't just any man, he's a billionaire. And he notices something in the single dad that no one else sees. But just when hope fills the room, a child whispers a secret that threatens to shatter everything. Whispers of hidden ties, whispers that could ruin lives. Is this father about to lose everything he's fought for, or gain a family, a future, and a place at the table no one ever thought he deserved? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The alarm clock's red digits glowed 4:47 when Elijah Brooks opened his eyes. 3 minutes before it would ring, his body knew the rhythm of early mornings, years of Army reveille, then years of pre-dawn bus routes. He reached across the nightstand and silenced the clock before it could wake Grace. The floorboards creaked their familiar song as he padded to the kitchen. Outside, Boston slept under a blanket of spring mist. He filled the kettle, its whistle soon breaking the quiet like a gentle summons to the day. 2 eggs cracked into the pan, wheat toast in the toaster. The movements came without thought, muscle memory from 1,000 mornings. "Daddy?" Grace stood in the doorway, school uniform already on, braids neat from last night's careful work. "Morning, baby girl. You're up early." She slid onto the kitchen stool, chin propped on her hands. "Couldn't sleep. Today's the luncheon." Elijah flipped the eggs, keeping his voice light. "That's right. Founders Day. You excited to show me around your school?" Grace picked at a spot on the counter. "Everyone else's parents bought tickets. Mrs. Whitmore said they're serving lobster bisque." The eggs sizzled. Elijah plated them alongside the toast, setting the meal before his daughter. "Well, I've got something better than lobster bisque planned." From the top shelf, he pulled down the weathered blue tin lunchbox. Its paint had chipped at the corners, revealing silver beneath. Sarah's lunchbox. She'd carried it through nursing school, packed with whatever they could afford. Now, it held different treasures. Elijah unwrapped the cornbread he'd baked last night, still fragrant with honey and butter. His grandmother's recipe, passed down through generations of Brooks women, until it landed in his careful hands. He wrapped it in a clean dish towel, the one with tiny violets at the edges that Sarah had loved. The chicken noodle soup went into the thermos. He'd simmered the broth for hours yesterday, adding carrots and celery, egg noodles made from scratch. The kitchen had smelled like Sunday afternoons at his mother's house. "Can I help?" Grace appeared at his elbow. "Apple duty." He handed her the fruit and a knife, watching as she cut careful wedges. She'd learned young, necessity making her skilled beyond her 10 years. While she worked, Elijah spotted the folded paper on the counter, Grace's courage card. She'd drawn it the night Sarah died, a heart colored in red crayon with the words, "Be brave, Daddy," in shaky letters. He'd carried it through his last deployment, through job interviews, through nights when grief sat heavy on his chest. "Should we bring it?" Grace asked, following his gaze. "Always." He tucked the card inside the lunchbox, nestled between the thermos and cornbread. Everything they needed. The number 47 bus arrived at 6:23, right on schedule. Marcus, the morning driver, nodded as they climbed aboard. "Morning, Brooks. Big day?" "Founders Day at Hawthorne." Elijah guided Grace to their usual seats. Marcus whistled low. "Fancy. You clean up nice." Elijah had pressed his one good shirt last night, the navy blue that Sarah had bought him for their anniversary. His khakis bore sharp creases. His shoes gleamed from patient polishing. The bus rumbled through Roxbury, past corner stores pulling up their grates, past Mrs. Chen sweeping her stoop. Grace pressed her face to the window as they crossed into Brookline, where the houses grew larger and lawns stretched green despite the early season. "Daddy?" Her voice came small. "What if they laugh?" Elijah shifted the lunchbox on his lap. At what? At us. At our lunch. At, she gestured at the space between them, at all the things that made them different from Hawthorne families. The bus stopped. 3 women in yoga clothes climbed on, clutching coffee cups that cost more than Elijah's hourly wage. They moved past without looking. Grace. He waited until she met his eyes. Your mama used to say something. She'd say, dignity don't come from what's in your wallet. It comes from what's in your heart. We've got full hearts, don't we? She nodded. And full bellies once we eat this cornbread. That earned him a smile. It is really good cornbread. The best. They transferred buses at Coolidge Corner. The second bus was newer, quieter, filled with morning commuters tapping at phones. Grace gripped his hand as they walked the final blocks to Hawthorne Academy. The building rose before them like something from a magazine, red brick and white columns, windows that caught the morning sun and threw it back in golden sheets. Parents streamed through the gates, many from cars that purred at the curb. Elijah recognized the careful choreography of wealth. Children kissed quickly, drivers pulling away to some important elsewhere. We may not have fancy silverware, Elijah said, squeezing Grace's hand, but we'll have enough. They climbed the marble steps. At the top, a banner proclaimed Founders' Day Luncheon, celebrating 150 years of excellence. Through tall windows, Elijah glimpsed white tablecloths, crystal glasses catching light. Grace straightened her shoulders, her mother's courage in the lift of her chin. Ready? He asked. She looked at the blue lunchbox, at the building that seemed to judge them already, then back at her father. Ready. They walked through the doors together. The courtyard opened like a theater, 3 stories of arched windows gazing down on white-draped tables. Servers in black vests wove between families, silver pitchers catching sunlight as they poured sparkling cider into crystal flutes. Even the children held their glasses carefully, practiced in the weight of fine things. Grace's hand tightened in Elijah's. The other parents moved in easy clusters, women in silk scarves, men in blazers that fit like second skins. Their laughter rang bright and certain. A string quartet played Mozart from a raised platform, the notes floating over conversations about spring breaks in the Hamptons and summer camps in Vermont. There. Elijah nodded toward the stone steps leading to the east garden. We'll eat there. They skirted the crowd, Elijah keeping his shoulders straight despite the weight of eyes tracking their movement. A few parents glanced at the lunchbox, then away, their smiles tightening at the corners. The steps were sun-warmed, peaceful. Elijah set down the lunchbox and started to open it when a shadow fell across them. "Excuse me." The security guard stood wide-legged, hands on his belt. His badge read Morrison. "This is a ticketed event." "Yes, sir, we're just no outside food allowed." Morrison's tone carried the particular authority of someone who enjoyed using it. "Catered events have strict policies." Heat crept up Elijah's neck. "We weren't going to eat at the tables, just here on the steps. School property." "Same rules apply." Morrison shifted, making his radio crackle. Several parents had turned to watch. Grace's face went scarlet. She pressed against Elijah's side, trying to become smaller. "I understand." Elijah's voice stayed level, though his jaw tightened. "We'll go." "That won't be necessary." A tall man stepped from behind Morrison. He wore the same black apron as the catering staff, but something in his bearing made the guard step back. The man's hair was silver at the temples, his hands clean but worn from work. When he smiled, crow's feet deepened around hazel eyes. "I'll take care of this." His voice carried quiet certainty. Morrison frowned. "They can't eat outside food at—" "I said I'll handle it." The man's tone didn't change, but Morrison's mouth snapped shut. After a moment, the guard walked away, muttering into his radio. The man in the apron turned to Elijah. "May I?" Before Elijah could respond, the man lifted the lunchbox with the care of someone handling precious cargo. "Please, follow me." He led them to a small table near the garden entrance, half hidden by a potted olive tree. The table bore the same white cloth as the others, the same crystal and silver. Wait here. He disappeared into the catering tent. Grace looked at Elijah with wide eyes. Daddy, what's happening? I'm not sure, baby. The man returned carrying porcelain plates and proper silverware. He set them down with practiced precision, then opened their lunchbox. Other servers glanced over, but something in the man's posture warned them off questions. He unwrapped the cornbread with reverence, placing it on a plate and drizzling honey from the catering supplies in an elegant spiral. The soup he poured into a proper bowl, garnishing it with fresh parsley. The apple slices he fanned across a small plate, adding a sprinkle of cinnamon. There. He set the transformed meal before them. Much better. Grace giggled, the sound bright with relief. It looks like restaurant food. Better than restaurant food. The man's eyes crinkled. This was made with love. You can taste the difference. He pulled out their chairs, settling them with the same attention he might give to visiting dignitaries. A server approached with a pitcher, but the man waved him away and poured their water himself, ice clinking against crystal. Thank you, Elijah said quietly. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. The man adjusted Grace's napkin, then met Elijah's eyes. Everyone deserves a seat at the table. Something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. This man knew about dignity, about the weight of being unseen. Is this your first Founder's Day? The man asked Grace. Second. Last year we just came for the ceremony part. And what do you think of Hawthorne? Grace considered. The library is amazing. They have every book you could imagine. A reader. The man smiled. What's your favorite? Right now, Island of the Blue Dolphins. It's about a girl who survives alone and builds her own world. Brave story for a brave girl. As he spoke, Elijah studied him. His hands bore old burns, the kind that came from kitchen work. His shoes were expensive but worn at the heels. He moved like someone who'd learned to be comfortable in any room, but hadn't forgotten what it felt like to stand outside. I should get back. The man straightened. Enjoy your meal, both of you. He started to leave, then paused. From his apron pocket, he pulled a small card, the catering company's business card, and placed it beside Elijah's plate. In case you ever need anything at all. Then he was gone, disappearing back into the organized chaos of the catering tent. Elijah picked up the card. Hearthstone Hospitality, it read in simple script. No name, just a phone number. Grace lifted her spoon, tasting the soup from its proper bowl. Daddy, why did he help us? Elijah watched the man's back as he directed other servers, his movements efficient but kind. Sometimes, Grace, people remember where they came from. The cornbread crumbled perfectly between Grace's fingers as she broke off a corner piece. Around them, the luncheon hummed with polite conversation and the clink of real silverware against porcelain. She watched the man in the black apron, Miles. He'd said his name was directing servers with small gestures, making sure water glasses stayed full, that no table went unattended. Daddy, should I? Elijah followed her gaze. Should you what? Share, like we do at church. Before Elijah could answer, Grace was already up, navigating between tables with her small plate. She stopped beside Miles as he adjusted a centerpiece. Excuse me? Miles turned, eyebrows lifting. Grace held out the plate. Would you like some? You made our food look so nice, but you haven't eaten anything. For a moment, Miles stood perfectly still. Then his face softened into something Elijah couldn't quite read. That's very kind. Miles accepted the offered piece with both hands, as if receiving communion. He took a bite, closed his eyes. Oh, my daddy made it. He used to cook in the army, and now he cooks at our church sometimes. Your father made this? Miles looked past Grace to where Elijah sat. This is real cornbread, the kind my grandmother used to make, with actual corn kernels and honey. Grace beamed. He says the secret is buttermilk and patience. Wise man. Miles finished the piece slowly, savoring each crumb. Thank you, Grace. You've given me the best thing I've tasted all week." She skipped back to their table, pleased with herself. Elijah noticed other parents watching, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed disdain. Charlotte Whitmore, the PTA president, whispered something to her table-mate that made them both look in his direction. The luncheon continued its orchestrated rhythm. Principal Kim gave remarks about tradition and excellence. Students received awards. Through it all, Elijah felt the weight of being observed, of not quite fitting the picture. "Mr. Brooks?" Principal Kim had approached quietly, her voice low enough that only he could hear. She settled into the chair Grace had vacated, while his daughter lined up for the student recognition ceremony. "Principal Kim, I need to tell you something." She glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. "The man who helped you earlier, do you know who he is?" He said his name was Miles. A small smile played at the principal's lips. "Miles Harrington III. He owns Hearthstone Hospitality hotels, restaurants, catering companies across the country. He's worth—" She paused. "Well, let's just say he could buy this school several times over." Elijah's hand stilled on his water glass. "He volunteers incognito at events, usually at schools he's considering for philanthropic support. He wants to see how institutions treat families across the economic spectrum when they don't know they're being watched." The revelation settled over Elijah like a weight. He thought of Miles's worn shoes, his practiced hands, the way he'd known exactly how to plate their simple meal. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he specifically asked me to ensure you knew you were welcome here. Both of you." Principal Kim stood. "Your daughter's scholarship review is coming up. I have a feeling it will go smoothly." She moved away before Elijah could respond. Across the courtyard, Miles caught his eye and nodded toward the garden path. Elijah waited a moment, then followed. They met beside a bench under an old oak tree, away from the crowd's scrutiny. Miles had removed his apron, revealing a simple white shirt underneath. "Principal Kim told you. It wasn't a question." Elijah nodded. "I prefer working events myself sometimes." Miles sat on the bench, gesturing for Elijah to join him. "You learn more with your hands in the work than from any boardroom presentation." "And what did you learn today?" "That this school has some serious blind spots about dignity and worth." "That security guard wasn't acting alone. Someone told him to watch for families who might not belong." Miles's jaw tightened. "I also learned that you make exceptional cornbread." Despite everything, Elijah almost smiled. "Principal Kim mentioned you cook at a church kitchen sometimes?" "Wednesday nights, Saturday mornings. We serve veterans mostly, some families from the neighborhood." "Which church?" "St. Catherine's, over on Hammond Street." Miles pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "We're testing a new program. Partner with local kitchens, hire from the community, provide training and equipment. The food you made, that's skill, real skill. Mr. Harrington, Miles." "Miles." Elijah chose his words carefully. "I appreciate what you did today, but I'm not looking for charity." "Neither am I." Miles pocketed his phone. "I'm looking for people who understand food as more than fuel, who know that a meal can be dignity, community, memory. Would you be willing to do a tasting next Saturday at your church kitchen? Bring whatever recipes you want. I'll bring my team." Elijah thought of Grace's scholarship review, of the worn equipment at St. Catherine's, of the veterans who came hungry for more than food. "What's the catch?" "No catch, just food, honestly evaluated. If it's as good as that cornbread, we talk next steps. If not, you'll never hear from me again." Miles stood. "Either way, your daughter's place here is safe. That's not conditional on anything." A burst of applause echoed from the courtyard, the student ceremony ending. Grace would be looking for him. "Saturday, 10 o'clock?" Miles extended his hand. 10 o'clock. They shook, and Elijah felt something shift, some door opening that had been closed his whole life. "Can I ask you something?" Elijah said, as Miles turned to go. "Of course. Why did you really help us?" before you tasted the food, before you knew anything about us?" Miles looked back toward the courtyard, where Grace was now visible, searching the crowd for her father. "Because 30 years ago, I was a kid with a lunch pail at a school like this, and someone saw me. Really saw me." He met Elijah's eyes. That changed everything. The courtyard hummed with satisfied conversation as servers weaved between tables, collecting plates and folding linens. Elijah had just returned to Grace's side when movement near the dessert station caught his attention. A small boy, no more than 6, approached Miles with determined steps. His dark hair stuck up at odd angles, and his dress shirt had come untucked from his khakis. He reached up and tugged at Miles's sleeve. "Mister?" Miles bent down, balancing a stack of plates in one hand. "Hey there, buddy. You need something?" The boy Mateo, Elijah remembered. Rosa Alvarez's son opened his mouth just as Rosa herself appeared, moving fast from the service entrance. Her face carried the particular exhaustion of someone who'd worked through the night and straight into day. "Mateo, no, come here." But the words had already left the boy's lips, soft but clear in the afternoon quiet. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The plates in Miles's hand clinked together. Conversations died mid-sentence. At the nearest table, a water glass paused halfway to someone's mouth. Elijah's arm moved without thought, drawing Grace against his side. She looked up at him, confused, but he kept his eyes on the unfolding scene. Rosa's face drained of color, then flushed deep red. "Mateo, stop. I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrington. He heard something wrong. It's all right." Miles set the plates on a nearby cart and crouched to Mateo's eye level. His voice stayed steady, kind. "What did your mommy say, Mateo?" The boy seemed puzzled by all the attention. He glanced at his mother, then back at Miles. "She was crying to Aunt Sophia. She said you were here and that you're my daddy, but you don't know." Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. Her whole body trembled. "Please." The word came out broken. "Can we not hear? Please." But the damage was done. Heads turned at every table. Elijah saw Charlotte Whitmore, the PTA president with her perfect blonde bob and pearl necklace, angle her phone just so. Her thumb moved across the screen recording. Parents leaned into each other, whispering. Some looked scandalized, others hungry for drama. A few seemed genuinely sympathetic, but they were outnumbered by those already spinning the story in their minds. Miles stayed crouched, his focus entirely on Mateo. "That's a big thing to say, buddy. Mommy cries about it sometimes." Mateo's voice carried the matter-of-fact tone children used for adult problems they didn't understand. "She says you gave her money once, but then you went away." "Mateo, enough." Rosa's voice cracked. She grabbed her son's hand, tried to pull him back, but he resisted. "You said he was nice. You said he wouldn't remember us." Miles slowly stood. The man who'd commanded the space with quiet authority an hour ago now looked shaken, though he tried to hide it. He met Rosa's eyes, hers swimming with tears and mortification. "Rosa, He stopped, aware of their audience. "We should talk, privately." "I'm sorry." She kept repeating it, clutching Mateo against her. "I'm so sorry. He wasn't supposed to. I never meant—" "It's okay." Miles's voice was gentle but firm. "We'll figure this out. Just not here." Principal Kim materialized from somewhere, her diplomatic smile in place but tension visible in her shoulders. "Perhaps we should move this conversation inside?" "No." Rosa backed away, still holding Mateo. "We're leaving. I'm sorry. We're leaving." She turned and half ran toward the service entrance, Mateo's confused protests trailing behind them. Miles stood frozen for a moment, then started after them. The whispers exploded the second they were gone. "Did you hear? Rosa's worked here for years. Miles Harrington has a child." The janitor's son, Charlotte Whitmore's voice cut through, pitched just loud enough to carry. "Well, this certainly explains some things about our schools." Recent hiring choices. Elijah felt Grace tense beside him. She understood enough to know something bad was happening, even if the details escaped her. "Dad?" "It's all right, baby." But it wasn't. Elijah recognized the signs, the way conversations shifted from whispers to declarations, how Charlotte's phone moved from person to person as she showed them something on the screen. The security guard who'd tried to turn them away earlier now stood straighter, vindicated somehow by this new scandal that didn't involve him. Parents began gathering their children, the ceremony forgotten. Some looked eager to leave, others reluctant to miss what might happen next. The servers continued clearing tables, but their movements had turned mechanical, their eyes tracking the drama. Elijah saw Miles return alone, his face carefully composed, but his hands clenched at his sides. He caught Elijah's eye across the courtyard, and something passed between them, a shared understanding of how quickly kindness could be weaponized, how fast hope could turn to ammunition in places like this. Grace tugged at Elijah's hand. "Is that boy okay?" "I don't know, sweetheart." His mom looked scared. She had, terrified actually, not just of the accusation or the shame, but of something deeper. Elijah recognized that particular fear, the kind that came from having everything to lose and no power to stop it. The courtyard continued to empty, but the whispers would follow them home, into group texts and dinner conversations, growing with each telling. The apartment felt smaller that evening. Grace sat at the kitchen table, moving her pencil across homework she wasn't really seeing. Elijah washed the same plate 3 times, his mind replaying the afternoon's chaos. His phone buzzed. Principal Kim's name lit the screen. "Mr. Brooks, I wanted to warn you before tomorrow." Her voice carried the weight of bad news delivered too often. "Charlotte Whitmore has sent an email to the board and several major donors." Elijah dried his hands on a dish towel, already knowing what came next. "She's suggesting you deliberately disrupted a ticketed event, that you used your daughter to gain sympathy and attention from Mr. Harrington." A pause. "She's also questioning whether Grace's scholarship should continue, given what she calls conduct unbecoming of Hawthorne families." The towel twisted in Elijah's grip. "We were invited to eat there, Miles himself. I know, I saw what happened, but Charlotte has a different version, and she's sharing it widely. The video she took is selective. It shows the disruption with Mateo, but not the context. Not Miles's kindness to you earlier." Through the kitchen doorway, Elijah watched Grace erase something forcefully, her frustration bleeding through. "There's more. The situation with Rosa and Mr. Harrington is already online. Someone leaked it to a gossip blog. They're calling it the Billionaire Caterer scandal. Your name is mentioned. I had nothing to do with. I know that too. But perception matters here, especially with our donors. I'll do everything I can to protect Grace's position, but you should be prepared." After she hung up, Elijah stood in his small kitchen, feeling the walls press closer. Morning came gray and damp. Elijah walked Grace to school early, before his bus shift. They found Rosa at the service entrance, her eyes red and swollen. She clutched a tissue that had seen better hours. "Mr. Brooks," her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. About yesterday. About everything." Grace squeezed Elijah's hand and went inside, sensing adult conversation coming. When she disappeared, Rosa's composure cracked. "6 years ago, I was working at one of his hotels, night shift cleaning the conference rooms." She pressed the tissue to her eyes. "He didn't know who I was, just another invisible person pushing a cart, but one night I was crying in a supply closet. My husband had just left, and I couldn't afford Mateo's medicine." The morning mist settled on Elijah's jacket, cold and clinging. "Miles found me. He was walking through, checking on things he does that shows up when nobody expects. He sat with me on the floor of that closet and listened, really listened. Then he wrote a check, $5,000, called it an employee hardship grant, but I knew he paid it himself." She twisted the tissue tighter. "We talked more after that. He'd stop by during my shifts, bring coffee. For 3 weeks I thought maybe, but then he traveled for business and never came back to the night rounds. I found out I was pregnant after he'd gone." You never told him? How could I? A janitor telling a billionaire she's carrying his child? Who'd believe me? Who'd believe it wasn't about money? Fresh tears spilled. I kept Matteo away from any place Miles might be. But when I heard he'd be catering here, I thought we'd stay invisible like always. I never imagined Matteo would recognize him from the one photo I kept. Elijah thought of Grace, of raising her alone, of the weight that never lifted. You deserve to be heard fairly. Whatever happened, whatever comes next, you deserve that much. Rosa shook her head. People like us don't get fair, we get blamed. The bus route felt longer that day. Every stop brought new passengers, and by noon Elijah had heard his own story 3 different ways. 2 women in medical scrubs discussed the desperate single dad who tried to social climb. A group of college students shared their phones, laughing at memes already spreading. Lunchbox Dad was trending. Heard that billionaire got ambushed by some gold digger's kid, an older man said to his seatmate. At some fancy school thing. The dad was in on it, his companion replied, brought his own food to get attention. These people have no shame. Elijah kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. 23 stops, 217 passengers. Each one carrying the story further from truth. That evening, Grace came home quiet, too quiet. She went straight to her room instead of settling at the kitchen table with homework. Elijah found her sitting on her bed, the courage card, the one she'd drawn for him, crumpled in her small fist. What happened, baby? Nothing. But he waited, the way he'd learned to wait in Afghanistan, patient and still, until the truth found its way out. Brittany's mom said, "You embarrassed everyone." She said, "You're the reason that boy made a scene." Marcus called you lunchbox man, and everyone laughed. She uncurled her fist, smoothing the card against her knee. Her careful drawing of a heart with wings was creased but intact. Are we going to have to leave Hawthorne? Elijah sat beside her, his weight dipping the mattress. Look at me, Grace. She did, her mother's eyes staring back at him. People are upset right now. They're saying things that aren't true because they're uncomfortable with what they saw. But we didn't do anything wrong. We ate lunch. We were kind. That's all. Then why? Because sometimes being different makes people angry, makes them want to put you back in what they think is your place. But we don't let other people's anger change who we are. He pulled her close, felt her small body relax against his. I won't let this break us. You hear me? We've been through worse and come out stronger. She nodded into his chest, and he held her until her breathing steadied. The church kitchen smelled of yesterday's bread and this morning's coffee when Miles arrived. No driver, no assistant, just a man in worn jeans and a Boston College sweatshirt, carrying a canvas grocery bag. Elijah almost didn't recognize him without the caterer's uniform. Thank you for meeting me. Miles set the bag on the steel counter. I brought ingredients, but I'd rather use what you normally cook with. Pastor Lila emerged from the pantry, her arms full of canned goods. Mr. Harrington, I've been praying for you. Just Miles, please. She studied him the way she studied everyone, seeing past the surface to whatever lay beneath. Miles, then. You'll find we run a simple kitchen here, nothing fancy, but everything made with care. That's why I'm here. Elijah watched this billionaire survey the mismatched pots, the donated utensils, the oven that ran 20 degrees hot. No judgment crossed his face. Instead, Miles rolled up his sleeves. Tell me what you need done. Before Elijah could answer, the side door opened. Rosa entered, Matteo's hand in hers. The boy brightened when he saw Miles, but Rosa held him back, her face tight with worry. You asked me to come, she said quietly. I did. Thank you. Miles crouched to Matteo's level. Hey, buddy, want to help us cook? Matteo nodded eagerly, but Rosa pulled him closer. We should talk first. About everything. Pastor Lila lifted Matteo onto a stool at the far counter. How about you help me sort these beans while the grown-ups talk? We'll make it a game. The boy went willingly, leaving the three adults in awkward silence. Miles spoke first. "I need you both to know something. I've been visiting schools undercover for 3 years now. Started after I read about kids being turned away from lunch lines for unpaid bills. I wanted to see how schools really treat families, not just how they perform when donors visit." He pulled out a phone, showing them photos, Miles in various kitchens, serving lines, dish pits. "Last month, I watched a security guard at Pemberton Academy escort a grandmother out because she brought McDonald's for her granddaughter's birthday. The week before, at Riverside Prep, I saw them seat scholarship families in a separate section during their gala." Elijah stirred the pot of beans Pastor Lila had started earlier, needing something to do with his hands. "Hawthorne was supposed to be different. Principal Kim promised me it was. Then I saw you on those steps, about to be turned away for bringing food to your daughter." Miles's voice roughened. "And instead of anger or embarrassment, you showed such dignity. You were ready to leave quietly rather than make a scene that might affect Grace. She matters more than my pride. That's exactly why your courage inspired me. Most people would have fought or left in shame. You did neither." Rosa shifted nervously. "But then, Mateo, we'll handle that privately," Miles said gently, "after we cook. Right now, I want to understand the food that comes from this kitchen, the heart behind it." Pastor Lila called from across the room. "The heart is community, Mr. Miles. Every dish tells a story. Elijah, show him Sarah's soup." Elijah's hand stilled. Sarah's soup. His wife's recipe. "I'd need to go home for the recipe cards." "No need." Pastor Lila opened a drawer, pulling out a small wooden box. "You gave me copies, remember? After the funeral, when you were teaching us her dishes so Grace would always be able to taste them here." The box felt heavier than wood should. Inside, his wife's handwriting covered index cards, some stained with sauce, others warped from steam. Real cooking, real life. She wrote notes on them, Elijah explained, his voice catching. Not just ingredients, stories. Where recipes came from, who taught them to her. Miles picked up a card carefully. "Cornbread the real kind," he read. "Not that sweet cake nonsense. From Grandma Essie, who said sugar in cornbread was a sin against corn." Despite everything, Elijah smiled. She had opinions. She had wisdom. Pastor Lila squeezed his shoulder. "Show him how she made it. Both of you, Rosa, you know this recipe too. You've helped serve it enough times." They worked together, awkwardly at first. Miles measured cornmeal while Rosa greased the cast-iron skillet. Elijah mixed the batter, muscle memory guiding his hands. The kitchen filled with the sound of Mateo counting beans, Pastor Lila humming hymns, the scrape of spoons against bowls. "No sugar," Miles noted. "Never." Sarah said, "Real cornbread should taste like corn, not dessert. It should hold up to greens, soak up pot liquor, make a meal when there's nothing else." Your wife understood food. She understood people. Said you could tell everything about someone by what they put on the table and who they invited to it. The oven door opened, heat rushing out. The skillet went in, already sizzling. 20 minutes, Elijah said. "While we wait, I'll show you her soup, the one Grace had at the luncheon." Miles watched him work, noting each movement. "You cook like a soldier." "I am a soldier, was, Army medic 8 years. And now? Now I drive a bus, cook here on weekends, take care of Grace. Try to be enough." Pastor Lila's voice carried across the kitchen. "You are more than enough, Elijah Brooks. Don't let anyone tell you different." That night, after Miles left with a container of soup and promises to return, after Rosa and Mateo went home with groceries Miles had quietly paid for, Elijah stood alone in his apartment. Sarah's recipe cards spread across his counter like a map of their life together. He touched each one: her banana pudding, her grandfather's ribs, the soup that saved them when money ran out. Then he closed his eyes, hands flat on the counter. "Sarah, I don't know what you'd make of all this. A billionaire in our church kitchen, that boy claiming him as daddy. These people trying to shame our Grace. But I'm going to trust that you're watching, that you're guiding this somehow. Help me see the light in this mess. Help me be the man Grace needs me to be." The cards stayed silent, but somehow that felt like answer enough. Saturday morning light filtered through the church kitchen windows, catching the steam rising from Elijah's pot. He'd arrived at dawn, Grace still rubbing sleep from her eyes but insisting on helping. Sarah's recipe cards lay spread across the stainless steel counter like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be assembled. "Smells like Mama's kitchen," Grace said, breathing in the scent of onions, caramelizing in butter. "That's the idea, baby girl." Pastor Lila bustled in, carrying a basket of aprons. None matched. Some had flowers, others Bible verses. One advertised, "Kiss the Cook," in faded letters. She held them up with pride. Everyone donated by folks who cooked here. Stories in these threads. The door opened. Miles stood there in jeans and a plain blue shirt, no designer labels in sight. He carried a knife roll, the kind professional chefs used, but kept it closed. "Where do you want me?" Elijah pointed to the sink. "Dishes. Every good kitchen starts with someone willing to wash." Miles rolled up his sleeves without complaint. "Yes, chef." Rosa appeared in the doorway. Mateo pressed against her leg. She'd braided her hair tight, wore her best work clothes trying to look respectable, Elijah recognized. The same way he dressed for school meetings. "We weren't sure." "Come in," Pastor Lila said, wrapping Rosa in a quick hug before she could retreat. "Mateo, you want to help me find the good spoons?" The boy nodded, releasing his mother's hand slowly. Rosa took an apron decorated with roosters, tying it with shaking fingers. "Bread duty for you," Elijah said gently. "Sarah's dinner rolls. Grace knows the recipe by heart." They fell into rhythm. Elijah's knife moved through celery and carrots in precise cuts, muscle memory from years of meal prep. Grace stood on a step stool, wooden spoon moving figure eights through the soup. Miles washed each dish as it was used, humming something that might have been jazz. Rosa's hands found their confidence in the dough, pushing and folding with practiced strength. "Your mama teach you that?" Pastor Lila asked Rosa. "My abuela said bread was proof that simple things could become miracles with time and patience." "Amen to that." Mateo sorted beans at the far counter, making patterns with the different colors. Every few minutes he'd look at Miles, then away, like checking if the sun was still there. "Needs more time?" Grace announced, tasting the soup. "You sure?" Elijah challenged gently. "Mama always said time was the memory herb, makes food taste like home." Miles stopped washing. "She sounds wise." She was. Grace added the time herself, careful not to pour too much. "Daddy says she's still teaching us through her recipes." The kitchen filled with stories as they cooked. Pastor Lila told about the time she accidentally used salt instead of sugar in communion bread. Rosa shared how she learned to stretch one chicken into 5 meals when Mateo was a baby. Miles admitted he hadn't cooked anything himself in 3 years, not since his father died and there was no one left to cook for. "Food tastes different when you eat alone," he said, drying a pot. "Then don't," Elijah replied simply. The bread rose, the soup thickened. Grace showed Mateo how to fold napkins into flowers, a trick Sarah taught her for making ordinary tables special. Pastor Lila set out mismatched plates and cups, each one donated over the years. "Mr. Miles?" Mateo's small voice cut through the kitchen sounds. "Are you really my daddy?" Everyone froze. Rosa's hands twisted her apron. Miles knelt to Mateo's height. "I don't know yet, but I promise we'll find out together. And no matter what, you've got people here who care about you. That's what matters most." "Okay." Mateo went back to his napkin folding. Question answered enough for now. They carried everything to the fellowship hall, where afternoon sun painted golden squares across the long wooden table. 20 chairs, but they clustered at one end, close enough to pass dishes without standing. Elijah ladled soup into bowls. Rosa's rolls steamed when pulled apart. Pastor Lila said, "Grace," thanking God for hands that cook and hearts that welcome. Miles took his first spoonful of soup and closed his eyes. "This tastes like," he paused, searching, "like my grandmother's house in Georgia. Sunday dinner after church. Kids everywhere, sweet tea on the porch." "You grew up like that?" Rosa asked, surprised. "Started there. Dad was a preacher's son who made good in business. We moved north when I was 12. Traded Sunday dinners for country clubs. Never found that taste again until now." Grace pushed the bread basket toward him. "Have another roll. They're best warm." The table filled with easier conversation. Plans for next week's veterans' dinner. Which vegetables were coming into season. How to fix the kitchen's temperamental oven. Normal things that made the morning's strangeness fade. "I want to invest in this," Miles said suddenly. "Not charity. Investment. This kitchen could supply more than soup dinners. Corporate catering, school contracts, real jobs for people who need them." Elijah set down his spoon. "We don't need saving. I'm not offering to save you. I'm asking to join you. There's a difference." Pastor Lila leaned forward. "What kind of difference?" "The kind where everyone signs papers, where decisions get made together, where profit goes back into the community. A cooperative, not a corporation." Rosa spoke up. "We'd need training, certifications, health department approvals. All manageable, but only if the community wants it." Elijah looked around the table. Grace's eager face. Rosa's cautious hope. Mateo contentedly eating rolls. Pastor Lila's thoughtful nod. "We'll pray on it," he said finally. "Decisions this big need more than one meal's worth of thinking." "Fair enough." They cleared the table together, nobody rushing. Grace taught Mateo a dishwashing song. Rosa and Pastor Lila discussed scheduling. Miles and Elijah stood by the window, watching the sun sink lower. "Your wife's recipes," Miles said. "They're more than food. They're all I have left of her voice. No, you have Grace. And now you have this people gathered around a table, sharing what they've made. That's her voice too." The kitchen slowly emptied. Mateo fell asleep in Rosa's arms. Grace tucked recipe cards back in their box with reverent hands. Pastor Lila blessed them all on their way out. Elijah stood alone in the quiet kitchen, Sarah's memory floating in the lingering smell of soup and bread. "We're trying, baby," he whispered. "We're trying." The churchyard stretched wide beneath old oaks, their shadows long in the afternoon light. Grace chased Mateo between the trees, their laughter bouncing off the brick walls. She let him catch her every third time, squealing dramatically when he tagged her shirt. "Got you, got you," Mateo shouted, dancing in circles. Elijah leaned against the doorframe, watching them play. Through the window behind him, he could see Rosa and Miles walking toward the garden bench near the memorial stones. Their conversation would be private, but their body language spoke volumes. Rosa's arms crossed tight, Miles's head bowed, listening. Pastor Lila appeared beside him with 2 cups of coffee. "Children make everything simple, until adults complicate it again. Maybe. Or maybe children remind us what simple looks like." In the garden, Rosa sat first, leaving space between herself and Miles. He remained standing, then slowly took the far end of the bench. Even from this distance, Elijah could see Rosa's hands shaking. 15 years ago, Rosa's voice carried faintly on the wind. "I was 27, waiting tables at your hotel restaurant downtown." Miles nodded, his profile still. "You came in late after board meetings, always alone. Always kind to the staff." Rosa pulled her sweater tighter. "One night the kitchen messed up your order 3 times. You made jokes instead of complaints. Said I deserved hazard pay for dealing with hungry executives. I remember. You had just started law school. Night classes. Never finished." Rosa's voice caught. "You asked about my studies. Really listened. Not many people did that." Grace had found a jump rope in the church's playbox. She turned it slowly while Mateo hopped, counting in Spanish and English. Uno, two, tres, four. We talked until closing that night, Rosa continued. Then the next night. A week later, you asked if I wanted to see the city from your office view. Just coffee and conversation, you said. It wasn't supposed to be anything more. No, but it was. Rosa's shoulders straightened. For 3 weeks it was. Then you flew to Tokyo for that merger. When you came back, everything had changed. You barely noticed the staff anymore. Miles's head dropped. The merger consumed everything. 18-hour days. I became someone I didn't recognize. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later. The words hung between them like a held breath. But there was someone else too. A man from my neighborhood who'd been asking me out. We had one date while you were gone. Just one, but the timing. You weren't sure. How could I be? And how could I tell you? The billionaire with his name on buildings, and me? A waitress who couldn't finish law school? People would say I trapped you, that I was after money. Rosa, I couldn't do that to my child, growing up with people thinking his mother was scheming. So I said nothing. Married David instead. He knew the truth and didn't care. Good man. Died when Mateo was 3. Grace had abandoned the jump rope for a grasshopper she was showing Mateo. They crouched together, whispering observations about its green legs. All these years, Miles said quietly, you raised him alone. Not alone. I had David for a while. Then church. Friends. But Mateo started asking questions lately, why he looks different from David's pictures. I was talking to my sister on the phone last week, crying about money and private school applications. I mentioned your name just once. I didn't know he was listening. Children hear everything. He's been carrying it around all week. Then he saw you at the luncheon, and it just came out. Miles shifted closer, not touching but reducing the distance. I'm sorry. For being so absent I didn't even notice you were gone. For becoming someone who put deals before people. You didn't know. I should have seen you, really seen you. They sat in silence. Grace was teaching Mateo to whistle with a blade of grass. Their attempts made more spit than sound, but they kept trying. We should do a test, Miles said finally. To know for certain. Yes. But Mateo doesn't need details. Not yet. He's 6. Whatever the results, I'd like to be in his life somehow, if you'll let me. Rosa wiped her eyes. He needs good men around him. And if he is mine, then we figure it out. Day by day. No courts, no lawyers. Just figuring it out. Together. Together. They stood slowly, like they were testing new legs. Miles held out his hand. Rosa looked at it for a long moment, then shook it. A business agreement and a peace treaty all at once. Walking back toward the church, they collected their children. Mateo had grass stains on his knees. Grace's hair had escaped its ponytail. They looked exactly as children should look after an afternoon of play. Mr. Elijah. Mateo ran over. Grace taught me grasshopper catching. Did she now? Elijah ruffled the boy's hair. She's a good teacher. Everyone gathered their things slowly, nobody eager to break the afternoon's fragile peace. Miles helped carry dishes to cars. Rosa braided Grace's hair back into place. Small kindnesses that meant everything. At the parking lot, they made awkward goodbyes. Miles and Rosa exchanged phone numbers. Grace hugged Mateo, promising to teach him more games next time. Pastor Lila blessed them all again, because once was never enough in her book. Elijah loaded Grace into their old sedan. In the rearview mirror, he watched Miles help Rosa buckle Mateo's car seat. Such a simple gesture, but Rosa's face softened at it. "Daddy?" Grace asked as they drove home. "Is everything going to be okay?" Elijah thought of Sarah, how she always believed in grace finding its way through truth. "I think so, baby. I think maybe it is." Monday morning broke gray and drizzly, the kind of Boston weather that seeped into bones. Elijah held Grace's hand as they approached Hawthorne Academy's iron gates. The usual morning chaos seemed muted. replaced by clusters of parents speaking in hushed tones. "There they are," someone whispered. Grace's fingers tightened around his. "Daddy, head up, baby. We've done nothing wrong." Charlotte Whitmore stood near the main entrance, her designer raincoat pristine despite the weather. She spoke just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Of course we support diversity, but there are standards. When people bring bagged lunches to formal events, when they involve themselves in situations, well, it affects our reputation, property values even." Mrs. Chen, usually friendly, avoided eye contact. The Petersons crossed to the other sidewalk. Grace's teacher offered a sympathetic smile but said nothing. "Some families," Charlotte continued, examining her manicured nails, "simply don't understand the culture here, the level we maintain." Elijah kept walking. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. "Kill them with kindness, love. It drives them crazy." "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore," he said pleasantly. Charlotte's smile could have frozen July. "Mr. Brooks?" Inside the school lobby, Grace's friend Emma waved, then got pulled away by her mother. The distance between the entrance and Grace's classroom had never felt longer. "Why are they being mean?" Grace asked at her classroom door. "Sometimes people get scared of things they don't understand. You just keep being you." She hugged him tight before disappearing inside. Through the window, he watched her take her seat alone, while other kids whispered. The bus route that morning felt endless. Every passenger seemed to be reading their phone, and Elijah caught fragments: "Billionaire baby scandal" and "Single dad gold digger." He gripped the steering wheel and drove. By afternoon, Elijah had almost convinced himself the worst was over. Then his phone buzzed as he pulled into the church parking lot. "Pastor Leela, health inspector here." "Come quick." The church kitchen was in controlled chaos. A stern woman in a city uniform prowled the space with a clipboard while volunteers stood frozen. Rosa was there, having started her new schedule, her face pale. "Rodent droppings," the inspector announced, pointing to black specks near the baseboard. "Improper temperature logs. Missing certifications." "That's Pepper," Pastor Lila said calmly, "from Saturday's cooking, and our logs are right here." She produced a thick binder, every page dated and signed. The inspector's frown deepened. "Anonymous complaint says you're operating a commercial kitchen without proper permits." "We're a church kitchen that serves our community," Elijah said. "Always have been. But now you're talking about catering contracts. That changes things." The inspector continued her tour, finding increasingly petty violations. A knife stored blade up. A first aid kit missing one bandage. The fire extinguisher inspection tag from last month instead of this one. Rosa started crying silently. This job had been her hope. The back door opened. Miles entered quietly, taking in the scene. He picked up a spare apron and began washing dishes without a word. "Who are you?" the inspector demanded. "Volunteer," Miles said simply. "Here to help." The inspector's eyes narrowed, but she continued her examination. Miles kept washing, but Elijah noticed him texting one-handed. 20 minutes later, a fire department captain arrived. "Heard you needed an extinguisher inspection." "We can do that now." The tag was updated immediately. A licensed electrician appeared next. Pastor Lila called about checking outlets. He hadn't, but he tested them all anyway, certifying each one. The inspector grew flustered. Every violation she found got fixed in real time. "The sink needs a proper grease trap for commercial use," she said desperately. "How much?" Elijah asked. $3,000. Installed. Miles pulled out his checkbook, started writing. "No," Elijah said. Everyone turned. Miles paused, pen hovering. "If we do this, we do it right." Elijah continued. "You write the check to the church. I co-sign for the work. We're partners, or we're nothing." Miles's smile was small but genuine. He rewrote the check, slid it across the steel prep counter. Elijah signed his name next to Miles's, dignity intact. The inspector had no more ammunition. "Fine. You have 30 days to install the grease trap. Kitchen can remain operational until then." She left, her boots clicking anger against the linoleum. The kitchen exhaled collectively. Rosa hugged Pastor Lila. The volunteers began nervous laughter. "Thank you," Elijah said to Miles. "Thank you for letting me help correctly." Evening fell. The volunteers had gone home, leaving Elijah and Pastor Lila alone in the kitchen. They stood at the old wooden prep table, hands joined. "Lord," Pastor Lila began, her voice carrying the weight of decades of prayer. "Thank you for this kitchen that feeds bodies and souls. Thank you for tests that make us stronger. Thank you for friends who show up," Elijah added. "For dignity preserved and partnerships built right. Protect us from schemes and schemers. Let our work speak louder than whispers, and help Grace tomorrow. Help all the children caught in adult foolishness. Amen." They stood in comfortable silence. The kitchen smelled of bleach and blessing, struggle and grace. "Charlotte won't stop," Pastor Lila said finally. "I know. She's got money, influence, connections. We've got something else." "What's that?" Elijah looked around the humble kitchen, the mismatched pots, the donated dishes, the prep table scarred by 1,000 meals. "We've got enough, and we've got each other." Pastor Lila squeezed his shoulder. "Your Sarah would be proud." Outside, rain started again, drumming against the windows, but inside the kitchen felt warm, safe, held. Whatever Charlotte planned next, they would face it. Together. The grease trap would be installed. The kitchen would keep cooking. Grace would hold her head high. Some battles were won not by fighting but by continuing. By showing up. By washing dishes and signing checks and praying over old prep tables. By refusing to let fear win. A week had passed since the inspection, and Hawthorne Academy's service day arrived with unusual April warmth. The church van pulled into the school's delivery entrance at dawn, loaded with stock pots and serving trays. Elijah checked his watch 2 hours before the students would need lunch. "Remember," he told Rosa and the other volunteers, "we're not just serving food, we're serving dignity." Rosa nodded, tying her hair back with practiced efficiency. 3 other parents from the church had joined them, all families who knew what it meant to stretch $1 and a prayer. The cafeteria had been transformed for service day. Student artwork covered the walls. Banners proclaimed "Community in Action" and "Hearts and Hands Together." Parents in matching volunteer T-shirts assembled care packages at long tables. Charlotte Whitmore stood near the serving line, her smile tight as a wire. "The food goes here," she said, pointing to a corner table. "The real volunteers need the main space. The food stations should be central." Principal Kim interjected smoothly, appearing with her own volunteer badge. "It brings everyone together." Charlotte's jaw clenched, but she stepped aside. They set up efficiently. Elijah started the soup warming while Rosa arranged the cornbread baskets. Fresh fruit salad, Grace's suggestion, filled clear bowls, simple food, made with care. Miles arrived carrying a case of napkins, wearing the same volunteer T-shirt as everyone else. He slipped into the kitchen line without fanfare, taking direction from Rosa about where things went. "Table 4 needs more spoons," she told him. "On it." No one looked twice at the Billionaire fetching silverware. By noon, the cafeteria buzzed with hungry students. They'd spent the morning packing toiletries for shelters, making cards for nursing homes, cleaning the playground. Now they descended on the lunch line with the appetite only service work could build. Grace stood beside her father, wearing a hairnet and the biggest smile he'd seen in weeks. She ladled soup with careful precision, making sure each bowl got plenty of chicken and vegetables. "This smells amazing," said a boy from her class, one who'd snickered about the lunchbox incident. "Way better than the usual caterers." "My dad made it," Grace said simply, not boasting. "Just fact." The boy took a bite. His eyes widened. "This is really good." Word spread down the line. Students came back for seconds. Teachers lingered over their bowls, savoring the homemade warmth. "Mr. Brooks," called Mrs. Patterson, the fifth-grade teacher. "This cornbread is heaven. My grandmother made something similar." "Old family recipe," Elijah replied. "My wife perfected it." A cluster of mothers approached Rosa at the fruit station. These were the same women who usually whispered when she cleaned their children's classrooms at night. "Rosa, this fruit salad, what's your secret?" "Lime juice and a little honey," she answered carefully. "Brings out the natural sweetness." They actually wrote it down. The afternoon service projects continued, but the cafeteria maintained a steady stream of people returning for snacks, for water, for just one more piece of cornbread. The kitchen team worked in smooth rhythm, Elijah managing the hot food, Rosa overseeing the cold stations, Miles quietly restocking whatever ran low. A photographer from the school newsletter captured Grace serving soup to the principal. Another shot caught Miles and Mateo high-fiving over successfully carrying a heavy water jug together. No one noticed these weren't staged moments. They were just people being people. "Mr. Brooks," a father approached one of the investment banker types who usually ignored him. "I heard you might be doing catering? My company has quarterly volunteer days. We'd love to hire you." Before Elijah could respond, another parent chimed in. "The senior center my mother attends needs a new meal service. Could you handle weekly deliveries?" Business cards appeared. Phone numbers were exchanged. Rosa started a list on a napkin. Charlotte watched from her corner, her carefully orchestrated event slipping from her control. When she approached the serving line, Grace cheerfully offered her soup. "No, thank you," Charlotte said stiffly. "It's really good, Mrs. Whitmore. My dad put love in it." The simplicity of the child's words seemed to deflate something in Charlotte. She accepted the bowl, took one spoonful, then another. She didn't speak, but she finished the entire serving. As the day wound down, Principal Kim stood at the microphone for closing remarks. Service Day reminds us that community isn't built by committees or budgets, it's built by showing up for each other. Today's meal, prepared by our own families, exemplifies that spirit. Thank you to Mr. Brooks, Ms. Alvarez, and the church kitchen volunteers for feeding not just our bodies but our sense of belonging. Applause filled the cafeteria. Real applause, not the polite gold-clapping usual at Hawthorne events. Grace hugged her father's waist. Rosa wiped her eyes. Even Miles, carrying a final tray of dishes, paused to take in the moment. They cleaned up together, students, parents, teachers, all pitching in. The investment banker father rolled up his sleeves to scrub pots. The note-taking mothers packed leftovers for the shelter. Charlotte, wordless, helped fold tables. As they loaded the van, Elijah felt something shift. Not victory exactly, but possibility. Hope with evidence. "Dad," Grace said as they drove home, "everyone loved your soup." "Our soup," he corrected. "We made it together." In the back seat, Mateo had fallen asleep against Rosa's shoulder, clutching a thank you card from the principal. Miles followed in his own car, having promised to help unload at the church. For the first time since the Founders' Day chaos, Elijah allowed himself to believe they might actually belong here. Not as charity cases or curiosities, but as contributors, as community. The sun set gold over Boston, and their humble van carried home something worth more than any catered spread: the knowledge that they had served with dignity and been received with gratitude. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Charlotte would regroup. Whispers would continue. But today? Today, they had fed people well. And that was enough. Miles's townhouse stood on a quiet street in Back Bay, its brick facade modest compared to the mansions nearby. Elijah parked the van carefully, checking twice that he wasn't blocking anyone. "It's just a house," Grace whispered, though her eyes were wide. "A nice house," Rosa corrected, smoothing Mateo's hair. Pastor Lila emerged from her old sedan, adjusting her best church dress. "The Lord's blessings come in many forms. Tonight we receive with grateful hearts." Miles opened the door himself, no butler, no staff. He wore jeans and a sweater, feet in worn slippers. "Welcome. Please, come in. I hope you're hungry. I've been cooking." The interior surprised them. Yes, the art looked expensive and the furniture pristine, but family photos covered every surface. A guitar leaned in the corner. Books overflowed their shelves. "You have a cat!" Mateo exclaimed, spotting an orange tabby on the windowsill. "That's Fitzgerald. He judges my cooking but eats it anyway." The dining room table was set with mismatched plates, some fine china, some everyday ceramic. In the center sat a basket of cornbread. "I used your recipe," Miles said to Elijah. "Third attempt, finally got it right." Elijah broke off a corner, tasted it. "You added something. Touch of maple syrup. My grandmother's trick. Hope that's okay." "It's good. Different, but good." They sat around the table, no assigned seats, no formality. Miles had made pot roast with vegetables, simple and hearty. Grace helped Mateo cut his meat. Pastor Lila said grace, her voice filling the room with warmth. After dinner, Miles cleared his throat. "I asked you here for a reason beyond sharing a meal." He retrieved a folder from a side table, spreading documents across the cleared dishes. "Hearthstone Hospitality wants to launch something new. We're calling it the Community Kitchen Initiative. The idea is simple contract with local organizations to provide food service for schools, senior centers, corporate volunteer days. Real food, made by people from the community, creating jobs that pay living wages." Rosa leaned forward. "Jobs? Starting with your church kitchen as the pilot program? We'll provide equipment upgrades, training, and guaranteed contracts. Elijah, you'd be our primary supplier, setting menus and standards. Rosa, I'd like you to oversee operations scheduling, inventory, or staff management." "I'm a housekeeper," Rosa said quietly. "You manage supplies for a building with 300 students. You coordinate schedules. You know every dietary restriction and allergy in that school. That's operations management." Pastor Lila studied the papers. "The wages listed here. 15% above market rate, full benefits, profit sharing after year 1. And you want us why?" Elijah asked directly. Miles met his gaze. "Because you cook with integrity. Because Rosa knows how to stretch every dollar. Because Pastor Lila has fed this community for 20 years. Because together, you understand something my MBAs don't, that food is about more than calories and profit margins." Elijah read through the supplier agreement carefully. Fair terms. No hidden catches. His signature would make him a partner, not a charity case. "What about the school? Charlotte?" Principal Kim supports this fully. As for Charlotte, the board values good food and fiscal responsibility over her objections. "The DNA test," Rosa said suddenly. "The results won't change this offer. Whatever those results say, this business arrangement stands on its own merit." Grace had been listening quietly. Now she spoke up. "Mr. Miles, will other kids' parents get jobs too?" "That's the plan. Veterans, single parents, anyone who needs good work and can deliver good food." "Can Mrs. Chen join? She makes the best dumplings." Miles smiled. "We'll definitely need Mrs. Chen." Mateo, who'd been playing with Fitzgerald, looked up. "Will Mommy be home for dinner now?" "More often, mijo," Rosa said, her voice thick. Elijah picked up the pen. Such a small thing, signing his name, but it felt like writing a new chapter. The ink flowed smooth and sure. Rosa signed next, her hand trembling slightly. Pastor Lila witnessed both signatures with her church seal. "We should celebrate," Miles said, producing a bottle of sparkling cider. "Grace, Mateo, there's juice in the kitchen. Glasses are in the cabinet." The children raced off, their laughter echoing down the hall. "This is really happening," Rosa breathed. "Monday morning, we start. 3 schools have already committed for fall." They raised their glasses, crystal mixing with mason jars Miles had found somewhere. "To new beginnings," Pastor Lila offered. "To dignity in work, Elijah added. To second chances, Rosa whispered. To community, Miles concluded. They drank as Grace and Mateo returned, dancing with their juice boxes. Grace grabbed Mateo's hands, spinning him until he giggled breathlessly. The adults watched, something loosening in the room. Not employer and employees. Not rich and poor. Just people who'd found their way to the same table. As they prepared to leave, Elijah lingered at the door. Thank you, he said to Miles. Not just for the opportunity, for seeing us. You fed me cornbread from a lunchbox when I was just a caterer. That's the world I want to live in. They shook hands, firm, equal. Walking to the van, Grace asked, Is Mr. Miles our friend now? Elijah considered. I think maybe he is. Good. He needs friends. His house has lots of things but felt lonely. Children saw truth so clearly sometimes. As they drove home, Boston's lights twinkling around them, Elijah felt something he hadn't experienced since his wife died, not just hope, but plans. Concrete, achievable plans. Tomorrow they'd return to the church kitchen and begin building something real. The storm arrived with Elijah's morning coffee. His phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, then buzzed again. And again. Dad? Grace stood in her pajamas, holding her own phone. Why are people saying mean things? The headline filled his screen. Billionaire's secret son, packed lunch dad angling for cash. Below it, photos from Founders Day. Him sitting with Grace. Miles plating their food. And there, a blurry video of Mateo tugging Miles's sleeve, the child's whispered words subtitled for maximum impact. The article painted him as a schemer, using his daughter's school to get close to a billionaire. Rosa appeared as a calculating single mother. Miles emerged as a naive philanthropist caught in their web. Charlotte's fingerprints were all over it, though her name appeared nowhere. Elijah's phone rang. Pastor Lila. Don't come to the kitchen today. What happened? We received a notice 20 minutes ago. The supplier contract is suspended pending review. Something about needing to verify our partners' backgrounds. The coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Grace helped him sweep the broken ceramic, neither speaking. His phone kept lighting up messages from other parents, from his supervisor at the bus company, from numbers he didn't recognize. Should I go to school? Grace asked quietly. Of course, we don't hide. But when they reached Hawthorne's gates, clusters of parents stood whispering. Charlotte held court near the entrance, her voice carrying. It's such a shame when people take advantage of generosity. The school has standards to maintain. Grace's hand tightened in his. They walked past, heads high, but Elijah felt the stares burning into his back. Principal Kim met them at the door. I need to speak with you, Mr. Brooks. Grace went to class alone. The board held an emergency meeting this morning, Principal Kim said, closing her office door. Grace's scholarship is under review again. I fought for her, but with this media attention. She's a straight-A student, I know, but donors are threatening to pull funding. I'm so sorry. Elijah drove his bus route in a haze. Passengers held newspapers with his photo on page 3. Someone had drawn devil horns on Miles in pen. His supervisor called him in after his shift. You're not in trouble, Brooks, but maybe take a few days off. Let this blow over. I need the hours. I know. But passengers are complaining. They feel uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. With him. The same man who'd helped deliver a baby on Route 7, who knew every regular stop, who'd never had a single complaint in 5 years. He drove home to find Rosa crying on his apartment steps, Mateo in her arms. They fired me. 20 minutes to clear my locker. No explanation needed. Probationary period. We'll fight this. With what? They have lawyers. We have nothing. That afternoon, a health inspector arrived at the church kitchen, the same one from before, but harder now, hunting for violations. This refrigerator seal is worn. It's scheduled for replacement Monday, Pastor Lila said. These logs are incomplete. They're filled out exactly as required. I'll need to review everything again. The kitchen is closed until further notice." Pastor Lila stood steady, but Elijah saw her hands shaking. 40 years she'd run this kitchen, fed thousands, never a single violation. They locked the doors. The silence felt wrong, no simmering pots, no volunteers chopping vegetables, no laughter over shared work. Miles called that evening. "I'm fixing this." "You're bored?" A pause. "They want me to distance myself publicly, just until the DNA results arrive and this dies down." "And?" I refused. "But they can block the Foundation's involvement. I'm so sorry, Elijah. It's not your fault." "It is. I should have been more careful. Should have known Charlotte would. We both knew what she was. We just hoped we were wrong." After hanging up, Elijah stood in his bedroom, looking at the aprons hanging in his closet. His wife's was there too, faded flowers on white cotton. He'd kept it all these years. He folded each apron carefully, placing them in a box. Grace found him there, sitting on the bed, with the box in his lap. "You're quitting?" "Just putting things away for now." She disappeared, returning with something in her small fist. The courage card creased and soft from years of handling. Her mother had drawn it during chemo, a heart with wings, words in careful script. "Courage isn't not being scared. It's being scared and going forward anyway." Grace slipped it into his shirt pocket. "Don't quit, Daddy." "I'm not quitting. I'm just tired." Mom would say, that's when courage matters most. She left him there, the card's weight against his chest heavier than it should be. The kitchen was dark. No appointment cards on the calendar. No prep lists for tomorrow's meals. He pulled out the card, tracing his wife's handwriting. She'd fought until the very end, smiled through treatments that ravaged her body, kept planning for Grace's future even when she knew she wouldn't see it. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The city moving on, indifferent to one man's crisis. His phone lit up with another notification. Someone had started a petition to remove Grace from Hawthorne. Already 200 signatures. The courage card trembled in his hands. The night pressed against the church windows. Elijah held Grace's hand as they walked through the side door, their footsteps echoing in the empty sanctuary. Pastor Lila sat in the front pew, a single candle flickering on the altar. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked without turning. Grace had a nightmare. Elijah settled beside her, Grace curling against his side. "About the school?" Grace nodded into his shirt. They were laughing. Everyone was laughing. Pastor Lila moved to the altar, lighting another candle, then another. The darkness retreated slightly, shadows dancing on the walls. "My grandmother used to light candles when things got hard," she said, "one for each worry. Then we'd watch them burn and remember that even the longest night ends." They sat in silence. The building creaked, settling into itself. Somewhere in the walls, pipes ticked their nighttime rhythm. Elijah closed his eyes. The words wouldn't come at first. Prayer felt stuck in his throat like bread gone dry. He thought of his wife, how easily faith had flowed from her, even at the end. She'd prayed over Grace's homework, over burned dinners, over hospital bills that kept coming. "Help me see the way forward. Not for me, for Grace." The door opened. Cold air swept in, carrying Miles with it. His clothes were wrinkled, the same pants and shirt from yesterday. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He stopped at the back pew, uncertain. "Come," Pastor Lila said. "Darkness is heavy enough without carrying it alone." Miles walked forward slowly, like a man approaching something fragile. He sat across the aisle from them, shoulders bent. "I made everything worse." "You tried to help," Elijah said. "My board held an emergency meeting. They want me to issue a statement distancing myself from the church kitchen, from all of you, until the DNA results arrive and prove whatever they prove." And I refused. But they control the foundation. They can block funding, kill the partnership. They're already drafting press releases about maintaining professional boundaries and protecting stakeholder interests. Pastor Lila, returned from the altar, settling between them like a bridge. You know what I learned as a nurse? Infection spreads in the dark, but light and air heal wounds. She looked at Miles. Your board fears the dark because they live in it. All those closed doors and private meetings, but we work in the light. We cook in the light. We serve in the light. Light won't pay for kitchen repairs, won't get Rosa her job back. No, but truth will stand when lies fall. Grace stirred against Elijah's side. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and studied Miles across the aisle. Without a word, she stood and walked to him. From her pocket, she pulled the courage card. The edges were soft, the drawing faded but still visible, a heart with wings. Her mother's careful letters spelling out the message about fear and moving forward. She placed it in Miles's palm, for when your hands shake. Miles stared at the card. His fingers did shake, just slightly. This is your card. Your mother made it. She made lots of them, for people who needed courage. Grace's voice was matter of fact, the way children deliver profound truths. You need it now. I can't take this. It's not taking, it's borrowing. You give it back when you're done being scared. Miles pulled Grace into a hug. Over her head, his eyes met Elijah's. An understanding passed between them, fathers recognizing the weight of failing the children who believed in them. Tell me about your wife, Miles said after Grace had dozed off again. Elijah shifted his daughter gently. She was light. Even when the cancer came, she found ways to shine, painted courage cards during chemo, taught Grace to bake between treatments, planned 5 years of birthday presents because she knew she wouldn't be there. She sounds remarkable. She was ordinary. That's what made her remarkable. She believed ordinary people could do extraordinary things if they just kept showing up. Is that why you keep showing up? Even when they try to push you out? Where else would I go? This is our home. That school is Grace's future. The kitchen feeds people who need feeding. You quit on none of that just because someone makes it hard. Pastor Lila hummed something low, not quite a hymn, more like a lullaby. You know what strikes me? She said. 3 grown adults, all trying to do right, sitting here in the dark because someone else chose to be cruel. Charlotte didn't create anything. She just lit a match near things that were already tender. Tender things burn fastest, Miles said, or they don't burn at all. Depends what they're made of. The candles flickered. Wax pooled and dripped. Time moved strangely in the sanctuary, minutes or hours, impossible to tell. What will you do? Elijah asked Miles. Board meeting is tomorrow at noon. They expect my resignation from the foundation if I won't comply. Will you? Miles looked at the courage card in his hand. Would your wife have? She'd have walked in there with her bald head high and told them exactly what needed saying. Then I know what to do. Grace mumbled something in her sleep. Elijah stood carefully, lifting her. We should go. Miles rose too. The DNA results arrive tomorrow. Does it matter what they say? To the board? Yes. To the media? Absolutely. He paused. To me? I already know what I need to know. Rosa deserves respect. Mateo deserves support. And you, both of you, deserve better than what's happening. They walked toward the door together. Behind them, Pastor Lila began extinguishing candles one by one, each small light surrendering to darkness until only one remained. Leave it burning, she called after them. Someone else might need to find their way tonight. Outside, the city stretched cold and indifferent, but the courage card in Miles's pocket felt warm, a small promise that morning would come. The apartment building stood like a tired soldier, its brick face weathered but still standing. Miles climbed 3 flights, each step echoing in the narrow stairwell. He'd grown up in buildings like this before money changed everything. The familiar smell of cooking oil and laundry soap brought back memories he'd buried under decades of success. Rosa answered on the second knock. She wore the same expression he'd seen at the church, part defiance, part exhaustion. You came. I said I would. She stepped aside. The apartment was small but spotless. Mateo's drawings covered every wall, houses with too many windows, stick figures holding hands, suns with faces. A grocery store calendar hung by the kitchen, each day marked with work shifts in careful pen. Coffee? Please. She moved through her kitchen with practiced efficiency. Everything had its place, mismatched dishes stacked precisely, canned goods lined up like soldiers. This was a home where every dollar counted twice. Mateo sat on the floor, building something ambitious with wooden blocks. He looked up when Miles entered but didn't speak, just watched with those serious eyes that seemed to see everything. The coffee was strong, served in cups that didn't match but were clean. They sat at a small table covered with a plastic cloth, the kind that could be wiped clean after every meal. Through the window, laundry hung on fire escapes, and pigeons gathered on windowsills. I should have told you. Rosa's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. 7 years ago, when I found out. Why didn't you? You were Miles Harrington. I was nobody. A waitress who served you coffee twice, maybe 3 times. We talked about books one slow afternoon. You were kind when my manager yelled at me for dropping a tray. She traced the rim of her cup. That night after the holiday party when I thought maybe. But morning came, and you were gone. Back to your real life. I don't remember leaving. You had a flight. Tokyo, I think. Some hotel deal. Her laugh held no humor. I remembered everything. You probably forgot before your plane landed. The weight of truth sat heavy. Miles had been that man once, moving through life at such speed that people became blurs. 3 weeks later, I knew. But I also knew Tommy, my ex, could have been the father. We'd been trying to work things out. She glanced at Mateo. When he was born, I convinced myself he was Tommy's. Easier that way. Tommy left anyway when Mateo was 2. So you raised him alone. My mother helped until she died last year. Now it's just us. Mateo abandoned his blocks and wandered over, carrying a green crayon and paper. He climbed into an empty chair and began drawing with focus that belonged on someone older. He heard me crying one night, about the bills, about maybe having to move. I was on the phone with my cousin, and I said something about you, about wondering what if. Rosa's tears came quietly. Children hear everything, remember everything. I never meant for him to stop. Miles's voice was gentle. You did nothing wrong. I taught my son to lie. You taught your son to survive. There's a difference. Mateo looked up from his drawing. He studied Miles's face with that unnerving intensity, then returned to his work. I was 28, building hotels and breaking ground on restaurants. I measured success in square footage and profit margins. Miles watched Mateo draw. I never saw the people serving the coffee, never wondered about their lives after they clocked out. That's my shame, not yours. But Mateo is a good boy who loves his mother. Whatever the test says, that won't change. Rosa wiped her face with a dish towel. The whole school thinks I'm after your money. The whole school is wrong. They think Elijah planned this, that we conspired. They're wrong about him too. Mateo finished his drawing and pushed it across the table to Miles. It was a house with 3 people standing in front, 1 tall, 2 shorter. Above them, a sun smiled down. That's us, Mateo said simply. Miles studied the drawing. In a child's honest lines, he saw what Mateo wanted, not money or status, just connection. Can I keep this? Mateo nodded solemnly. Whether the test says I'm your father or not, Miles said carefully, looking at the boy. I'd like to be your friend. Would that be okay? Friends help each other. Yes, they do. Mom needs help. Mateo. Rosa's face flushed. It's true. You cry about the bills, and the rent, and my shoes with holes. Miles folded the drawing carefully. Friends do help each other, but they also respect each other. Your mom is strong. She doesn't need rescue, but maybe we can all help each other. Would you like that? Mateo considered this with the gravity of a judge. Then he climbed down from his chair and into Miles's lap, wrapping small arms around his neck. Don't go. The words were muffled against Miles's shoulder, but they landed like hammers. This child who'd grown up watching people leave his father, his grandmother, security in all its forms, was asking for the one thing money couldn't buy. Miles held him carefully, as if he might break. Over Mateo's head, he met Rosa's eyes. She was crying again, but differently now. These were tears of relief, of burdens shared. "I'm not going anywhere." 3 days stretched like weeks. The clinic waiting room smelled of disinfectant and anxiety, its beige walls decorated with posters about wellness that nobody read. Miles sat rigid in a plastic chair while Rosa twisted a tissue to shreds. Elijah had come for support, bringing Grace, who colored intently in a book of butterflies. Mateo swung his legs from a too-tall chair, humming something tuneless. Every few minutes, he'd glance at Miles, then away, as if checking he was still there. Green or blue for the wings. Grace held up 2 crayons for Mateo's inspection. "Both. You can't use both." "Why not?" Grace considered this logic and began coloring one wing green, the other blue. Elijah smiled despite the tension. Children had a way of making simple what adults complicated. The door opened. A nurse in purple scrubs held a manila envelope. "Alvarez and Harrington?" Rosa's hand flew to her throat. Miles stood slowly, as if sudden movement might shatter something. "Would you like to open it here, or here?" Rosa's voice cracked. "Please." The nurse handed Miles the envelope and left quietly. He held it like it might burn. Around them, the normal sounds of the clinic continued, phones ringing, a baby crying somewhere, the hum of fluorescent lights. "You should open it," Rosa whispered. "Together?" She shook her head. "You, please." Miles's fingers were steady as he broke the seal, though Elijah noticed his jaw tighten. He pulled out the single sheet, his eyes scanning quickly to the bottom. The room held its breath. "I'm not his biological father." The words landed softly. Rosa's tears came immediately, not the dramatic sobs of movies, but quiet streams that she didn't bother to wipe. Her shoulders curved inward with something that looked like relief, braided with sorrow. Mateo stopped swinging his legs. "What's biological?" Before anyone could answer, Miles was on his knees in front of the boy's chair. At this height, they were eye to eye. "It means I'm not your father by blood. Like how some families are made when babies are born, and some families are made when people choose each other." "Oh." Mateo processed this with 6-year-old directness. "Are you sad?" "No." "Why not?" "Because blood doesn't change how much I care about you." "Or your mom." Miles's voice stayed even, though Elijah saw his hands tremble slightly. "I want to be your friend, your teacher, your family, if you'll have me. Even though I'm not yours, you could be mine in all the ways that matter, if you want." Mateo studied Miles's face with that unsettling intensity he had. Then he launched himself forward, thin arms wrapping around Miles's neck. "Don't go away." "I won't. Promise? Promise." Rosa's quiet crying became audible sobs. Grace abandoned her coloring to pat Rosa's knee with the confidence of a child who'd seen adults cry before and knew sometimes they needed to. "It's okay," Grace told her. "Mr. Miles keeps promises. He promised Daddy about the kitchen, and he did it." Elijah moved closer to Rosa, offering her a fresh tissue from his pocket. "You all right?" "I thought he'd hate me, when he knew for sure I'd kept this from him for nothing." "Seems to me he's grateful." She looked up, confused. "You gave him a chance to choose. Man like that, who's had everything decided by money and blood his whole life, maybe choosing matters more." Miles stood, still holding Mateo, who'd wrapped his legs around his waist like a koala. The boy was whispering something in his ear that made Miles smile, the first real smile Elijah had seen from him since the scandal broke. "What now?" Rosa asked. "Now we tell the truth." Miles shifted Mateo to one arm, extending his free hand to Rosa. "All of it. That I'm choosing to be in Mateo's life because I want to be, not because I have to be. Charlotte will twist it. Say you're admitting guilt anyway. Let her. The truth is better than anything she can invent. Pastor Lila's words echoed in Elijah's mind. Truth will stand when lies fall. We should do it together, Elijah said. At the church, not some press conference in a hotel. Just truth, told plain. Miles nodded. Tomorrow? Tomorrow's Sunday. Rosa's voice was small. I don't want to disrupt services. Sunday's perfect. Elijah stood, gathering Grace's coloring supplies. Tell the truth in a place built for it. Besides, Pastor Lila's been praying for a chance to speak her mind about all this. Grace tugged on her father's sleeve. Can I bring my courage card? Already in my pocket, baby. They filed out of the clinic together, an unlikely group bound by circumstance and choice. Outside, the afternoon sun broke through clouds that had threatened rain all morning. Mateo was still attached to Miles like a barnacle, showing no signs of letting go. Mr. Miles? Mateo's voice was muffled against his shoulder. Yeah? If you're not my real dad, what should I call you? Miles paused on the sidewalk, considering. What do you want to call me? Miles is okay, or Uncle Miles, or just family? Family. Miles tested the word. I like that. They walked toward their separate cars, but the distance between them had closed. Tomorrow, they would face Charlotte's whispers with truth. Tonight, they were just 4 adults and 2 children, choosing to be family in all the ways that mattered. The envelope that had held such power lay forgotten in the clinic's trash. Its purpose served. What mattered wasn't written on any test. The fellowship hall smelled of coffee and furniture polish, its usual Sunday evening emptiness replaced by rows of folding chairs and the low murmur of gathered voices. Someone had strung the overhead lights with paper lanterns left over from last month's potluck, casting warm shadows across faces both familiar and strange. Elijah stood near the makeshift platform, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. The weathered blue lunchbox sat on a small table beside the podium, its tin surface catching the light. Stop fidgeting! Rosa smoothed her black dress with steady hands, though her voice carried a tremor. You're making me nervous. You're already nervous. Well, you're making it worse. Miles emerged from a side door, having traded his usual casual clothes for a simple gray suit. No power tie, no cufflinks that cost more than most people's rent. He looked like what he was choosing to be, a man among neighbors, not above them. They're all here, he said quietly. Charlotte, too. Front row. Of course she is. Rosa's jaw tightened. Let her sit wherever she wants. Pastor Lila swept past them toward the podium, her Sunday robes replaced by a simple purple dress. Truth doesn't need the best seat to be heard. The crowd settled as Miles approached the microphone. No throat clearing or paper shuffling. He simply began. 3 weeks ago, a 6-year-old boy asked if I was his father. Today, I'm here to answer that question honestly. Charlotte leaned forward, phone ready. The DNA test confirmed I am not Mateo's biological father. Miles let the words hang. But biology isn't the only way to make a family. I'm choosing to be in Mateo's life as a mentor, a friend, and yes, as family, because love is a choice we make, not a debt we owe. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Charlotte's typing slowed. Some of you came here expecting scandal. What you're getting instead is truth. Rosa Alvarez is one of the strongest women I know. She raised a remarkable son while working nights to keep a roof over his head. She deserves your respect, not your whispers. Rosa stepped forward, her hand finding Miles's shoulder. I kept a secret out of fear of judgment, of losing my job, of not being believed, but secrets grow heavy in silence. Today, we're setting them down. Mateo, sitting between Grace and Pastor Lila in the front row, waved at his mother. She waved back, tears streaming freely now. And Elijah Brooks, Miles continued, turning to where Elijah stood, came to his daughter's school with a packed lunch and dignity intact. He didn't crash anything, he didn't angle for money. He showed up as a father who refuses to let his daughter feel less than. No matter what letters come home about dress codes and dinner prices, the room had gone completely still. Which brings me to why we're here, in this church, instead of some hotel conference room. Miles pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Today, Hearthstone Hospitality is announcing the creation of the Lunchbox Promise Fund. He unfolded the paper, not a press release, but a hand-drawn design by Grace, showing stick figures sharing food around a wobbly table. This fund will provide full scholarships for children of veterans and single parents at participating schools. It will also endow community-run kitchen cooperatives like the one Elijah and Rosa will lead here. Not charity, Elijah stepped forward, his voice carrying strong partnership. We cook, we serve, we employ our neighbors. Miles provides infrastructure. Everyone maintains dignity. Charlotte's hand shot up. Mr. Harrington, aren't you simply buying good press after a scandal? No, Miss Whitmore. I'm investing in what matters. And speaking of what matters. Miles nodded to Pastor Lila. The pastor approached the podium, lifting the blue lunchbox with careful hands. Yesterday, while cleaning this precious tin for display, we found something. She opened the lid, revealing the usual compartments, then pressed a hidden corner. The lining popped free, and she withdrew a small envelope, yellowed with age. Elijah's late wife Denise left this. He hadn't known it was there. Elijah's breath caught. Grace scrambled from her chair, reaching for her father's hand. Pastor Lila's voice filled the room, warm as July sunshine. My loves, if you're reading this, it means I've gone ahead to set the table. But I need you to know, there will always be enough. Enough food, enough love, enough room. Make space for others. Share what we have. The table grows wider when we pull up more chairs. That's the only wealth that matters. All my love, Denise. The first sob came from somewhere in the back, then another. Even Charlotte had stopped typing, her phone lowered to her lap. Grace pressed her face against Elijah's side. Mama knew, she whispered. She knew we'd need more chairs. Miles returned to the microphone. The lunchbox promise isn't about me or my money. It's about Denise Brooks's faith that there's always enough if we're willing to share. It's about Rosa's courage to work 16-hour days for her son's future. It's about Elijah showing up with cornbread and dignity when the world told him he didn't belong. He looked directly at Charlotte. And yes, it's about recognizing when we've built tables too small and doors too narrow. That changes now. Here, with all of you as witnesses. The applause started slowly, Pastor Lila first, then Grace bouncing on her toes, then spreading through the room like warmth from a stove. Even some reporters were clapping, their cynicism momentarily dissolved. Charlotte stood abruptly and walked out, her heels clicking sharp against the floor. But her departure felt small against the swell of community filling the space she left. Miles found Elijah's eyes across the crowd. No words needed. Just a nod between men who'd found brotherhood in the strangest of circumstances. The blue lunchbox sat open on its table, Denise's letter visible within, proclaiming what they were all learning to believe. There will always be enough. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the church steeple when Elijah's phone rang. Principal Kim's voice came through warm and certain. Mr. Brooks, I'm calling to inform you that Grace's scholarship has been fully reinstated permanently this time. No more provisional status, no more reviews. Elijah sat down hard on his kitchen chair. Grace looked up from her cereal, spoon frozen halfway to her mouth. Additionally, Principal Kim continued, I have a petition here with 372 signatures from Hawthorne families. They're demanding the school honor its commitment to diversity, real diversity, not just window dressing. 372? Started by a group of mothers who were at the press conference last night. They're calling themselves the Welcome Table Committee. A smile crept into her voice. Charlotte Whitmore sent her resignation from the PTA board an hour ago. Seems someone tracked down the original footage from Founders Day and proved she'd edited it to look worse than it was. After Elijah hung up, Grace flew into his arms. We get to stay? We get to stay. Can we tell Mr. Miles? Let's tell him in person. The kitchen reopens today. They arrived at the church to find a crowd already gathered. Volunteers who'd scattered after the shutdown stood ready with aprons and anticipation. Rosa had arrived before dawn, her inventory clipboard in hand, Mateo helping by drawing smiley faces next to each item. The city health inspector's van pulled up, and the crowd tensed. But when Inspector Rodriguez stepped out, his face carried something unexpected shame. "Mr. Brooks," he began, hat literally in hand, "I owe you an apology. The violations I cited were influenced by outside pressure. That wasn't right. Your kitchen exceeds every standard we have." He handed Elijah a new certificate. "Grade A, no restrictions, and I've recommended you for the city's Community Kitchen Excellence Award." Pastor Lila appeared at Elijah's elbow. "Forgiveness makes more room at the table than grudges ever could." Rodriguez nodded gratefully and shook Elijah's hand before leaving. Miles arrived through the back door, pushing a cart loaded with fresh vegetables from the farmer's market. He wore old jeans and the church's most battered apron, the one usually relegated to dishwashing duty. "Heard we have orders to fill," he said simply. Rosa laughed, the first real laugh Elijah had heard from her in weeks. 50 gallons of soup for the school, 30 for Sunset Senior Center, and Pastor Lila somehow promised 20 gallons to the fire station. Then we'd better get chopping. The kitchen transformed into orchestrated chaos. Elijah took his station at the massive soup pot, adding ingredients with the precision of years of practice. Rosa kneaded dough for cornbread, her movements steady and sure. Miles worked the prep station, his knife skills surprising everyone. Apparently his empire hadn't erased his roots. Mateo appointed himself the official cornbread tester, taking tiny bites from each batch for quality. Grace helped label containers with her careful handwriting, Made with Love by the Hearth, Home Cooperative. The volunteers fell into rhythm. Mrs. Chen from the choir peeled potatoes while humming hymns. Marcus, a veteran from Elijah's support group, handled the industrial mixer with military efficiency. 2 teenagers completing community service hours discovered they actually enjoyed the work when nobody was forcing them. "Order up," Elijah called out, ladling soup into transport containers. "Behind you," Rosa warned, carrying a tray of cornbread fresh from the oven. The kitchen filled with steam and purpose. Somebody had brought a speaker, and soon Motown classics mixed with the sounds of productivity. Miles caught Elijah's eye while actually dancing with a mop during floor cleaning. Even Elijah couldn't suppress a grin. Around noon, unexpected visitors arrived, 3 mothers from Hawthorne Academy, wearing designer boots definitely not meant for kitchen work. "We're from the Welcome Table Committee," one announced. "We came to help." Rosa handed them aprons without hesitation. Within minutes, they were elbow-deep in dishwater, their manicures forgotten in the joy of common purpose. "My daughter hasn't stopped talking about service day soup," one admitted to Elijah. "Said it tasted like someone actually cared who was eating it." "That's the secret ingredient," Pastor Lila called out. "Love and respect. Can't buy those at restaurant supply stores." By 3 o'clock, the first delivery was ready. They loaded Miles's borrowed van, he'd left the Bentley at home, with containers that would feed hundreds. The senior center director met them at the door with tears in her eyes. "We've been making do with frozen dinners since our last kitchen service canceled. This smells like my grandmother's house." At the school, students pressed against the cafeteria windows, watching them unload. Several recognized Elijah and started waving. Grace blushed with pride as her classmates pointed. "That's Grace's dad, he made the soup." Back at the church, the kitchen hummed with satisfaction. Mateo had fallen asleep on a pile of empty flour sacks, cornbread crumbs still dotting his chin. The last pot simmered on low while volunteers shared their own meal around the long table. Miles raised his water glass. To Denise Brooks, who knew there would always be enough. To second chances, Rosa added. To courage cards and cornbread, Grace chimed in. To all of us, Elijah finished. And to tomorrow's batch. the building filled with the clink of glasses and easy laughter. Outside, the evening sun painted the windows gold, and inside, the kitchen smelled exactly as it should, like hope served hot, welcome served wide, and dignity served with extra cornbread on the side. 1 year later, the spring air carried cherry blossoms across Hawthorne Academy's courtyard. White tablecloths fluttered in the breeze, but this time the servers wore aprons bearing Hearth Home Cooperative, embroidered in simple script. No security guards lurked by the steps. No one checked tickets. Elijah stood behind the serving station, ladling soup with the same care he'd once reserved for battlefield triage. His uniform wasn't a bus driver's polyester or a medic's fatigues, just a clean apron over his best shirt, the one Grace had picked out for him. "Dad, you're going to overflow that bowl," Grace whispered, nudging him gently. She'd grown 2 inches and gained something harder to measure, a quiet confidence that made her stand taller than height alone could account for. Her hair was pulled back with the same blue ribbon she'd worn last year, but everything else had changed. "Just making sure everyone gets enough," Elijah said, smiling at the memory of another Founder's Day. Rosa worked the bread station, her movements efficient as ever. She'd traded her night cleaning shifts for kitchen management, and the shadows under her eyes had given way to something brighter. Parents greeted her by name now, asking for her cornbread recipe, treating her like what she'd always been, a professional deserving respect. "Mateo, careful with those plates," she called out. The boy wore a child-sized apron that Miles had specially ordered, Junior Chef, stitched across the front. He carried dishes with exaggerated care, tongue poking out in concentration. Miles shadowed him, ready to catch any wobbles, wearing his own well-worn cooperative apron like a badge of honor. Principal Kim approached the podium, tapping the microphone. "Before we begin our meal, one of our students has asked to say a few words." Grace walked to the front, her courage card tucked in her pocket, not for strength anymore, but for memory. The courtyard quieted. "Last year, my dad brought a lunchbox to this event because we couldn't afford the catered meal." Her voice carried clear and strong. "Mr. Harrington Miles made sure we had a place at the table anyway. That simple act started something bigger than any of us expected." She gestured to the serving stations. "Today, our community kitchen feeds not just this school, but senior centers, shelters, and families across the city. We learned that welcome isn't about having the fanciest food, it's about making sure everyone has enough." 2 children stood beside her, clutching new backpacks. "These are the first recipients of the Lunchbox Promise Scholarships, Maria Santos and David Kim. They're here because we believe every child deserves a seat at the table." The courtyard erupted in applause. Maria's mother wiped her eyes while David's grandmother clutched Pastor Lila's hand. Charlotte Whitmore's replacement, a warm kindergarten teacher named Beth, stood up at her table. "Let's hear it for the Hearth home team." The applause doubled. Somebody started chanting, "Soup, soup, soup," until laughter overtook the rhythm. As families filled their bowls and broke bread together, conversations flowed between tables that would have been segregated by invisible lines just 1 year ago. The surgeon's wife asked the mechanic's husband for his mother's tamale recipe. Children compared favorite subjects without caring whose parents drove which cars. Miles and Mateo made rounds with the dessert cart, simple butter cookies that Mateo had helped shape that morning. "Cookie?" Mateo offered each person with serious professionalism. "He's been practicing that all week," Rosa confided to Elijah during a quiet moment. "He's got a good teacher," Elijah replied, watching Miles show Mateo how to use the serving tongs properly. As the sun began its descent, painting the courtyard golden, Pastor Lila gathered everyone for a final ceremony. They walked in a casual procession to the fellowship hall, where 2 new additions graced the wall. The first was Elijah's weathered blue lunchbox, preserved in a cedar shadow box with museum-quality care. Beside it hung a simple bronze plaque that read, "Welcome is our wealth." This lunchbox, Pastor Lila announced, reminded us that dignity fits in the smallest spaces and overflows into the largest hearts. Miles stepped forward. The Hearth Home Cooperative now employs 37 people, veterans, parents, neighbors, who needed not just work but purpose. We serve over 2,000 meals a week. All because one man had the courage to pack a lunch and one community had the wisdom to make room. It wasn't just me, Elijah protested, but his voice was drowned in appreciation. Grace tugged her father's sleeve and pointed to the wall. There, surrounding the shadow box, were photos from the past year, volunteers laughing in the kitchen, Mateo covered in flour, Rosa teaching teenagers to knead dough, Miles and Elijah planning menus, Pastor Lila blessing massive pots of soup. The final photo showed this very moment a year ago, Elijah and Grace on the steps with their lunchbox, unaware that everything was about to change. "Look, Daddy," Grace whispered, "we made it." The fellowship hall filled with the sounds that had become their symphony, children's laughter, ladles against pots, chairs scraping as people made room for one more, and underneath it all, the quiet hum of grace making itself known through shared meals and opened hearts. Outside, evening settled over the school, but inside, the light remained warm and steady, fed by something more sustaining than electricity. A community that had learned to measure wealth not in dollars, but in welcome, not in status, but in service, not in separation, but in soup shared freely with all who hungered for belonging. If you enjoyed the story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.